IECT-1. The hashes of a resina. The desert doesn't have a soul. It only has a stomach. It digests everything you leave behind: broken cars, lost hikers, and 12-year-old boys. 15 years ago, my parents, the two people who were supposed to be my protectors, parked their red Chevy at a mobile station in the middle of the Arizona wasteland. The heat was so intense, you could smell the rubber melting off the tires. Father, Richter, looked at me through the rearview mirror with eyes as dry as the sand. Alex, get out, check the rear passenger tire. I think it's losing air. I trusted him. I was a kid. I stepped out into the 110 key heat, and before my hand even touched the rim, the engine roared. They didn't even look back. I watched that red car shrink into a tiny speck of dust until the silence of the desert swallowed me whole. They thought they had successfully deleted their biggest mistake. But they forgot one law of physics. Energy doesn't disappear, it just changes form. Today, I own this ground. I didn't just buy it, I conquered it. I built the Redemption Hotel, a $100 million obsidian tube of glass, steel, and high-tech nightmares. And today, I invited my biological creators back for a reunion. They think I'm the forgiving son who made it big in Silicon Valley. They think they've hit the ultimate lottery. They're wrong. This isn't a hotel. It's a precision-engineered courtroom designed to extract the one thing they've spent 15 years hiding: their humanity. Stay until the very last second, because the final bill isn't paid in currency. It's paid in a revelation that will haunt you long after this video ends. ACT-2, the parasite. I found them rotting in a trailer park in Oklahoma. Victor and Ellen, my mother and father. They looked exactly like the life they chose. Bitter, smelling of cheap gin and cigarettes, their faces etched with the lines of people who blame the universe for their own mediocrity. When my assistant handed them the gold-plated invitation, they didn't ask, "How is Alex?" They didn't ask, "How did he survive the night we left him to die?" The first thing out of Victor's mouth was, "Does the suite have a private bar?" They arrived in the black limousine I paid for. As they stepped out into the shadow of the obsidian cube, I watched them through 4K security cameras. They looked like rats entering a palace, sniffing the air for profit. I met them in the lobby. The interior was a freezing 65 degrees, a sharp psychological contrast to the desert heat outside. "Welcome home," I said. My voice was as flat as a heart monitor in a morgue. Ellen tried to hug me, her breath a mix of menthol and desperation. I stepped back, my eyes fixed on the Rolex she was already eyeing on my wrist. "Let's skip the fake tears," I whispered. "Your suite is ready. The legacy suite." The room was a masterpiece of white marble and glass. But on the center of the coffee table, I placed a single item, a dusty blue gym bag. The exact bag I was holding when they drove away. "What's this trash?" Victor asked, already pouring a glass of 30-year-old scotch from the minibar. "It's a reminder," I said through the intercom, "of the day the weight was lifted off your shoulders." ACT-3, the Polex Litigation procession. They didn't care. They were too busy checking the thread count of the sheet and counting the amenities. But at 3 a.m., the hotel began to speak. The walls of the Legacy Suite weren't just walls, they were massive OLED screens. The lights dimmed to a sickly rhythmic red, and a sound began to play. Low at first, then deafening. The sound of a 1998 Chevy engine revving. I played it on a loop for 4 hours. I watched them on the hidden cameras as they paced the room, hammering on the doors. But the doors were reinforced steel. The ventilation system began to pump in a synthetic scent, the smell of burning rubber, hot asphalt, and 87-octane gasoline. I wanted them to remember. I wanted that smell to trigger the exact chemical reaction they felt the moment they abandoned their son. Breakfast was served at 8 a.m. It wasn't a 5-star meal, it was 2 stale, plastic-wrapped gas station sandwiches and a bottle of lukewarm water. "What is this insult?" Victor scraped at the ceiling. "We are your parents." "We are guests in this hotel," I replied, my voice echoing through the suite. "You get exactly what you gave. You told me 12 years of food and shelter was enough of a favor. I think 3 days is more than enough for you." That afternoon, the Redemption architecture began to move. The hotel was modular, built on massive hydraulic pistons. Slowly, the 1,500 square foot suite began to shrink. The ceiling lowered. The walls pushed inward. By sunset, they were trapped in a space the exact dimensions of the back seat of that old red Chevy. Then the audio started. I spent millions on AI voice reconstruction. I found old home videos and tapped into their digital archives. I played back their own conversations from the day they left me. He's too expensive, Victor, Ellen's young voice rang out. If we drop him, we can finally move to Vegas. We can be free of the burden. I know, young Victor replied. He's just a weight around our necks. We'll leave him at the mobile station, not our problem anymore. I watched Ellen cover her ears. I watched Victor drink more, his hands shaking so hard he spilled the scotch. They were listening to their younger selves plan a murder by negligence. That's not us, Ellen screamed. We were young, we were struggling. You weren't struggling? You weren't struggling, I said. You were bored, and I was an inconvenience. ACT4, the living confession. By the third day, the psychological walls were closing in. They were dehydrated, sleep-deprived, and trembling. That's when I opened the doors. They stumbled into the lobby, ready to run into the desert heat just to get away. But I was standing there with a titanium briefcase. You came for money, right? I asked. Victor's eyes locked onto the case. Even now, after the torture, the greed was the only thing left in him. You owe us, Alex, he wheezed. We brought you into this world. You're a billionaire because of the tough love we gave you. I opened the case. Inside were $10 million in bearer bonds. This is your exit fee, I said. But there's a condition. We are live streaming to 5 million people right now. Tell them the truth. Tell them exactly how it felt to see your son in the rearview mirror. Ellen looked at the money. She didn't hesitate. She looked into the lens and began to justify it. He was a difficult child, she told the world. Leaving him was the best thing we ever did. Look at him. He's rich. We did him a favor. Victor joined in, laughing manically as he grabbed the bonds. Yeah, this is back pay for the years we had to feed him. They were subhuman. They had just confessed to a felony on a global stage, and they were too busy counting the paper to notice. Sign here, I said, pushing a contract across the table. It's a release form. It states that you accept this money as a final settlement. They signed it so fast the pin nearly snapped. They ran to the limo, clutching the briefcase like it was their god. ACT5, the legal landmine. The limousine dropped them off at a bank in Phoenix. They ran inside, demanding to deposit the bonds. But the manager just looked at the computer screen and sighed. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Vance. These bonds have been flagged. Flagged? Flagged? That's $10 million, Victor shouted. They are real, the manager said. But there is a morality clause in the contract you signed. The funds are only accessible if the recipients are not under active criminal investigation for the events described in your legacy confession. At that moment, the FBI walked in. Because they had confessed to child endangerment on a live stream with millions of witnesses, an immediate arrest warrant had been issued. But it gets better. The contract they signed also authorized me to handle their legal defense. And I had already hired the most incompetent, disgraced lawyers in the country for them. I didn't want them to just go to jail. I wanted them to go to jail destitute. The $10 million? It was immediately seized by the state to pay for their incarceration and as a mandatory donation to a foundation for abandoned children. AACC 6, the final twist. I stood on the roof of the Redemption Hotel and watched the FBI cars disappear into the dust. Then I pulled out a small encrypted remote. One press of a button, and the $100 million obsidian cube began to vibrate. I didn't build it to last. It was a stage, a multi-million-dollar theater production for an audience of 2. Within seconds, a series of controlled implosions turned the glass and steel into a pile of black sand. The hotel was gone, but I wasn't done. I walked over to the old, rusty gas pump, the only thing I hadn't destroyed. I looked at the boy and the old Polaroid I always carried. Then I looked at my own reflection in the gold-plated pump. And here is the secret I'll never tell the police. Victor and Ellen were so blinded by greed they never realized the most important detail. The boy they left at the gas station, he actually died that first night. He wandered into a dry well and never came out. My name isn't Alex. I was the runaway kid from a different town who found his body. I was the one who took his gym bag, his ID, and eventually his name. I'm not their son. I'm just the ghost who spent 15 years building a fortune just to deliver a message from a dead boy. I am the shadow of the son they murdered. As I climbed into my helicopter, I looked down at the wasteland. The set was gone. The parents were in a cell. And the boy in the well finally had someone to settle his debt. I looked at the pilot and smiled. "RUI is perfect," I said, and let's go home. Forgiveness is for the weak. Accountability is for the legends.